A young woman, a mother's worst nightmare, a crime so gruesome it still haunts Houston to this day. Two young lovers, their throats slashed in a desolate field, their bodies discovered in one of the most chilling crime scenes Houston police had ever encountered. A case filled with mystery, dead ends, cryptic messages, and a murderer who, after more than 3 decades, has yet to be caught. This is the story of Andy Atkinson and Cheryl Henry, a case that should have been solved years ago. August 22, 1990 was just another warm summer night in Houston. 22-year-old Cheryl Henry was a fun, caring young woman. She had been seeing Andy Atkinson, a 21-year-old new to Houston, for only a short time, but things were going well between them. That night, they made plans for a date. Cheryl's younger sister, Shane, even tagged along for part of the night before saying goodbye and leaving them to enjoy their time alone. The couple drove off into the night, presumably to find a quiet spot to talk, listen to music, and be together. They were never seen alive again. The first signs of trouble came the next morning when Cheryl didn't show up for work. That wasn't like her. She was reliable, punctual, but her car wasn't at home. Her sister Shane got a call at work from one of Cheryl's co-workers. Cheryl hadn't shown up. Her heart sank. Shane had been with Cheryl and Andy the night before. She had left them around 11 p.m., assuming they were just going to continue their date. Now, something didn't feel right. Panic quickly spread through Cheryl's family. No one could reach her or Andy. His family was just as worried. By that evening, they had called the police, reported the two missing, and launched their own search. Shane, Cheryl's mother Barbara, and Andy's father Garland hit the streets of Houston, retracing every step Cheryl and Andy might have taken. They were looking for one thing, Andy's white Honda. Finally, around 8 p.m., a security guard made a call that sent chills down their spines. He had found Cheryl's purse inside an abandoned white Honda in a secluded area, an area known locally as Lover's Lane. The location was ominous. A lonely, undeveloped stretch of road with nothing but fields and woods surrounding it. It was a place where young couples snuck away for privacy. When Cheryl's family arrived, what they saw inside the car made their worst fears come true. The security guard who had called said he first noticed the car earlier that morning. It had seemed strange but not suspicious. Hours later, when it was still there, he decided to take a closer look. The windows were down. The seats were reclined. The key was in the ignition, but the battery was dead. Then he found Cheryl's purse and called her mother. But something else was inside the car. Something the security guard hadn't even noticed. Dark red stains covered the door panel and parts of the seat. Blood, and there was no sign of Cheryl or Andy. The discovery sent a chill through the searchers. They immediately called 911. At first, the response was painfully slow. The first officers didn't arrive for nearly an hour. When more backup was finally called, the area was swarming with law enforcement. Helicopters flew overhead, shining lights down into the fields. Search dogs sniffed through the darkness. The officers fanned out, combing through the tall grass. Then, at 11 p.m., an officer made a grim discovery. Shane watched as an officer approached her mother, whispered something in her ear. Then the scream. A guttural, primal scream of a mother who had just lost her child. The police had found Cheryl's body. She was lying face down in the woods, naked, her hands tied behind her back with rope. Her throat had been slashed so deeply she was nearly decapitated. Nearby, her dress was found cut to pieces. A $20 bill lay beside it. Had the killer left it as a message? As police processed the scene, the question remained, where was Andy? The search continued through the night, but Andy was still missing. His father, Garland, couldn't rest. He walked the tree line over and over. It wasn't until the next morning, when the sun had risen, that another officer made a gruesome discovery. Andy was found tied to a tree, sitting against it, as if he had been placed there deliberately. His hands were bound behind his back. His legs were stretched out before him. Like Cheryl, his throat had been cut so deeply that he was almost decapitated. 2 young lives ended in brutal, precise violence. The police were baffled. Who could have done this? Something at the crime scene didn't sit right with investigators. A golf club and golf balls from Andy's car had been lined up in a straight line, pointing toward Cheryl's body. Was it random? Or was the killer leaving behind a signature? Even more baffling was the fact that neither Cheryl nor Andy had any obvious defensive wounds. Had they been subdued so quickly that they couldn't fight back? Or was there more than one attacker? Investigators theorized that the attack began in the car. Andy had been injured first. His blood was found inside. The couple was then marched into the woods. Cheryl was likely killed first, leaving Andy tied up, forced to watch. Then it was his turn, a slow, painful execution. The brutality of the case stunned the city, and for once investigators had something rare in 1990, DNA. Biological evidence had been collected from Cheryl's body. It was carefully preserved in the hopes that one day DNA technology would provide a match. But there was a problem. In 1990, DNA databases weren't widely used. Police had to rely on traditional detective work, interviewing suspects, looking for motives. Years passed. Nothing. Then, in 2001, Houston police received an anonymous letter. It was short, chilling, and direct. If you want to know who killed C. Henry and A. Atkinson, it will cost $100,000. The letter instructed police to place a reply in the Houston Chronicle. Desperate, police played along. They waited, but no response ever came. Who had sent the letter? Was it the killer? Someone who knew the truth? The trail went cold. It wasn't until 2008, 18 years after the murders, that a breakthrough finally came. Police ran the DNA again. This time it matched another case, a sexual assault from June 1990. The details were horrifying. A young woman had been attacked inside her own home. Her hands were bound, her mouth taped shut. The attacker knew her. He called her boyfriend by name, and then he vanished. The DNA was the same as the one found on Cheryl. Finally, they had a connection. But there was one problem. There was still no name. Whoever this man was, he had never been arrested for a crime that required DNA collection. No matches in CODIS, no suspects that fit. Had he killed again, or had he disappeared? For decades, Cheryl's family has fought for answers. To this day, Houston police refuse to confirm whether genetic genealogy is being used to track the killer. They say the case remains open. But for Cheryl and Andy's families, that's not enough. A mother lost her daughter. A father spent his final years searching for justice. And a killer walked away free. But someone out there knows the truth. After 34 years, it's time for justice.